Barron Trump. The name everyone knows but the person few truly understand. On this ordinary evening at Le Bernardin, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, the 18-year-old son of former President Donald Trump was about to show the world exactly who he is, not through words, but through actions that would leave an entire restaurant speechless. There he sat, all 6'7" of him, quietly at his table, doing what any teenager does, checking his phone between bites of his appetizer. Just another Tuesday evening in Manhattan. Or so it seemed. But across the dimly lit restaurant someone was watching. Someone whose blood was boiling at the mere sight of the tall, well-dressed young man. Someone who was about to turn this peaceful dinner into a scene that would leave the entire restaurant speechless. What happened next wasn't just unexpected. It was a moment that would challenge everything people thought they knew about the youngest Trump. A moment that would soon go viral across social media, not for the drama, but for something entirely different. This is the story of how one confrontation in a high-end restaurant revealed the true character of a young man who never asked to be in the spotlight. But first, let me take you back to exactly how it all began. Let's rewind to exactly 7:30 p.m. Barron had just finished a long day at university and decided to treat himself to dinner at Le Bernardin. Unlike what many might expect from someone of his status, he chose a quiet corner table, accompanied only by his close friend from college, James. The restaurant buzzed with the typical evening crowd, Wall Street executives entertaining clients, couples celebrating anniversaries, and the usual mix of New York's elite. But Barron, despite his commanding height and distinguished appearance, somehow managed to blend in, just the way he preferred it. He was dressed simply but elegantly, a navy blazer over a white shirt, his signature style that somehow made him look both his age and mature beyond his years. As he and James discussed their upcoming finals, their conversation occasionally punctuated by quiet laughter, you'd never guess this was the son of one of the most controversial figures in American politics. The security detail, two men in suits sitting 3 tables away, were so discreet that most diners hadn't even noticed them. This was exactly how Barron liked it. No fuss, no special treatment, just a normal evening out with a friend. Their appetizers had just arrived, a perfectly plated tuna tartare that Le Bernardin was famous for. Barron was in the middle of sharing a story about his latest architectural design project, his face lighting up as he described his vision for a sustainable urban development plan. But that's when everything changed. At a table near the bar, a man in his 40s kept glancing over, his expression growing darker with each look. His dining companion, clearly uncomfortable, whispered something to him, but he wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on Barron, and his hands were gripping his napkin so tightly his knuckles had turned white. It started with a screech of a chair being pushed back too forcefully. The man stood up, his face flushed red. Whether from anger or the 3 martinis he'd consumed, it wasn't clear. His dining companion grabbed his sleeve, whispering "Don't," but he yanked his arm away. The man walked with deliberate steps toward Barron's table, weaving slightly between the elegant place settings. Other diners began to notice, conversations dropping to whispers, forks pausing midway to mouths. The 2 security men shifted in their seats but remained stationed, watching intently. "Must be nice," the man's voice was loud, cutting through the refined atmosphere like a dull knife. "Must be really nice to sit here, eating your fancy dinner, while regular people suffer because of your family." Barron looked up, his fork gently placed down beside his plate. His friend James tensed, but Barron's face remained remarkably calm. The man wasn't finished. "You think you're better than everyone else? Sitting here in your expensive clothes, pretending to be normal?" The man's voice grew louder with each word. "Your father ruined lives and here you are acting like nothing's wrong." The restaurant had fallen completely silent. Every eye was on their corner. A waiter stood frozen, holding a bottle of wine. The maitre d' was already moving toward them, but he was too far to intervene quickly. Barron slowly pushed his chair back and stood up. At his full height, he towered over the man, but there wasn't a hint of intimidation in his posture. His face showed something unexpected, not anger, not fear, but what appeared to be concern. The security detail was now on their feet, but Barron raised his hand slightly, a subtle signal for them to wait. The man seemed to falter for a moment, perhaps not expecting this composed reaction from a teenager he'd just publicly berated. What happened next would later be described by witnesses as a masterclass in grace under pressure. Barron Trump, standing at his full height, did something completely unexpected. He smiled. Not a mocking smile, not a defensive one, but a genuine, almost sympathetic expression that seemed to catch his aggressor completely off guard. "Sir," Barron's voice was steady and surprisingly warm. "I can see you're having a difficult evening, and I understand you have strong feelings about my family." He paused, making direct eye contact with the man. "But I'd like to ask you something if you'll let me. Would you judge an 18-year-old for the actions of their parents? Would you want your own children to be confronted this way?" The man's face flickered with uncertainty. He opened his mouth to respond, but Barron continued, his voice remaining gentle but firm. "I'm just a college student trying to have dinner with my friend. I'm studying architecture because I want to build things that bring people together, not divide them. I don't ask for special treatment, and I don't expect everyone to like my family. But maybe, just maybe, we could start by treating each other as individuals?" The restaurant remained completely silent, every diner hanging on each word. The man's aggressive stance began to deflate visibly. But Barron wasn't finished. He reached for his wallet, and what he did next left even his security detail looking surprised. "Let me take care of your dinner tonight," he said, pulling out his card. "Not because I'm trying to show off or because I think I'm better than you, but because I want to show you that underneath all these assumptions and headlines, we're just two people who happened to be in the same restaurant on the same night." The man stood there speechless. The anger in his eyes was replaced by something else, confusion, then embarrassment, and finally a glimmer of shame. A few tables away, an elderly woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. I don't need your—" The man stammered, his voice now barely above a whisper. "I insist," Barron replied, handing his card to the nearby waiter. "And if you're willing, I'd be happy to tell you about the community center design I'm working on for my final project. It's actually aimed at bringing people from different backgrounds together to have real conversations, not unlike this one." The tension in the room began to dissolve. Someone at a nearby table began to applaud softly, and within moments the entire restaurant joined in. The man, now completely disarmed, took a step back, his face red for an entirely different reason than before. I'm sorry," he managed to say before turning and walking quickly toward the exit, leaving his bewildered dining companion behind. As Barron sat back down, the applause continued. He simply nodded politely and returned to his conversation with James, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone in Le Bernardin that night knew they had witnessed something remarkable, a moment where hatred was met with kindness, and anger was transformed by understanding. The ripple effects of what happened that evening at Le Bernardin would extend far beyond its elegant walls. As Barron returned to his meal, the energy in the restaurant had transformed completely. The same diners who had watched the confrontation in tense silence now spoke in hushed, admiring tones. An elderly couple stopped by his table on their way out. "Young man," the gentleman said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've been coming to this restaurant for 40 years, but I've never seen such dignity from someone your age." His wife nodded in agreement, adding, "Your parents must be very proud." But it wasn't just the immediate reaction that made this evening memorable. Within hours, social media was buzzing with accounts from various diners who had witnessed the scene. A prominent food critic, who happened to be dining there that evening, wrote a powerful thread about it. "Tonight, I went to review a Michelin-starred restaurant's new menu. Instead, I witnessed a masterclass in emotional intelligence from an unlikely source. We're quick to judge people based on their last names, but sometimes the greatest lessons come from those we prejudge the most." The story spread, but not in the way these confrontations usually do. There was no viral video of the argument, no sensationalized headlines about celebrity drama. Instead, what captured people's attention was the way an 18-year-old had managed to transform a potential disaster into a moment of genuine human connection. In the days that followed, several news outlets tried to contact Barron for interviews about the incident. True to his nature, he declined them all. His only public comment came through a simple post on his private social media: "Kindness costs nothing. Understanding builds bridges." Perhaps the most surprising aftermath came 2 weeks later. The man who had confronted Barron sent a letter to the restaurant, asking them to forward it to him. In it, he wrote a heartfelt apology and explained that he had been going through a difficult time in his life. He admitted that he had chosen to project his frustrations onto an easy target, never expecting to be met with such compassion. But the real legacy of that evening wasn't in the viral posts or media coverage. It was in the small changes it inspired. Le Bernardin's staff noted that in the weeks following the incident, they observed more instances of diners anonymously paying for other tables' meals. The restaurant even added a new cocktail to their menu called the High Road, with all proceeds going to a charity focusing on youth empowerment and conflict resolution. As for Barron, he continued his architecture studies, still maintaining his low profile. But among his classmates and professors, there was a new level of respect, not because of his famous last name but because of the character he had displayed that evening. Sometimes the most powerful statements aren't made through grand gestures or loud proclamations, but through quiet moments of grace when faced with adversity. And on that ordinary Tuesday evening in one of New York's finest restaurants, Barron Trump had shown that the best way to disarm hatred is not with more hatred, but with something far more powerful: understanding and kindness. As our story comes to an end, it's worth reflecting on what really happened that night at Le Bernardin. A young man constantly in the spotlight but never seeking it, showed us that the true measure of character isn't in how we treat those who are kind to us, but in how we respond to those who aren't. Barron Trump went to the restaurant that evening expecting nothing more than a quiet dinner with a friend. He left having taught everyone present a lesson that no textbook could deliver. In a world where confrontations usually end up in viral videos of anger and division, his response stands as a reminder that we all have a choice in how we react to hostility. The tall, quiet teenager who many had only known through headlines and photographs revealed something powerful that night. Sometimes the strongest response to anger is simply refusing to reflect it back. This is Barron Trump's story. Not the one you might have expected, but perhaps the one we needed to hear. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that reminds us of our shared humanity. Until next time, remember, it's not the confrontations we face that define us, but how we choose to handle them.